You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. Once again, we are here today. We have another show line for y'all. We have a special guest. His name is Jonathan Kemp. He is a mental health advocate, an entrepreneur, and the creator of SmartWisdom, a scientifically validated note-taking system used by professionals and students around the world. He is a person that you're going to enjoy today because just like everyone else on the show, he has a powerful story. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, depression, and dyslexia at 39. But Jonathan's story is powerful, and it's also a reminder that titles, education, and success don't make you immune to pain. We're going to learn more about his story. He has been a police officer, entrepreneur, and student of post-grad academia, and now he's here to share his voice on this show. I know you have a lot more on your resume, but I had to do a little speed up and get you in. So first and foremost, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm very, very well, and thank you very much for having me.
I appreciate you being on. Let's kind of go into your earlier life, part of your life. What were some of the earlier signs that something deeper was going on inside you, even if you at first couldn't name it yet?
Yes. So I think it was apparent to me before the age of 10 that things weren't right and that in some way I was different to others, but I didn't understand what it was and I couldn't explain it. But I remember sort of thinking, people who got a broken arm, they were fortunate in that, you could clearly identify you've got a broken arm. But there was something wrong with me and there was something wrong with my brain, but I had no idea. And at that time, mental health wasn't really talked about at all. And so I had no sort of reference points whatsoever. And that pretty much carried on until my early 20s, actually, by which time I knew something was seriously wrong. I stopped drinking, taking substances in my early 20s. I worked as a cowboy in Australia for a year, and it's one of the best years of my life. But even then, I remember there were some nights that I'd just go out on my own and sort of lie on my back looking at the stars, which were amazing, and just trying to work out what was wrong, trying to think of different ways of thinking. But I had a lot, not all the time, but quite a bit of the time, I had this feeling of sort of discomfort or, and then at other times it's like a sort of mental nausea. And it also felt like I was sort of continually fighting with my thinking, with my brain, trying to get my brain to focus on things that I wanted it to focus on. And the reason I stopped drinking and taking drugs is because I knew by then that the line between sanity and insanity was finer than a piece of hair. And, if I took any substances, I crossed over.
That's powerful insight to have, because a lot of times you read about or hear about people just kind of avoiding everything at all costs, but you chose to recognize what was truly going on. I think that's very interesting. Kind of touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
How were you able to recognize, wow, okay, there's a threshold. If I overdo it, I might not be able to come back?
Yeah, it was sort of quite apparent. I remember at school, I was going down to the pub. I was at a boarding school, and I was going down to the local town to the pub. And I said to someone, do you want to come down with me? And they said no. And I said, oh, why? And they said, well, when you start drinking, you behave differently. And that was quite a revelation. I didn't really know what they were talking about. But by the time I left school, it was sort of clear in my mind that the thing that I really wanted, and the thing that sort of kept driving me from then for the next 20 or so years, was what I really, really wanted out of life was to find peace of mind. Wasn't an amazing career or anything else. I mean, I was very lucky. I did some, really interesting work. But the overarching objective was to find peace of mind.
Once again, listen to our Refocus Radio and talking to our guest today, Jonathan Kemp. When you think about what are some of the most common invisible battles that high-functioning people face, why do you believe or think that they oftentimes miss those?
So I think as long as you can function and as long as you can sort of produce the goods, as it were, you'll keep going. So, and also for me, and I guess it might be the same with a number of other people, for a long time, I thought it was something external to me. So if I made more money, then that might make a difference. If I got a better education, if I did better at my work, if I, got fitter, if I ate better, if I did all of those things at once, maybe that might make a difference. And all of that sort of searching wouldn't be really apparent to anybody else. And also anything I did, I gave it my best shot. So as long as there's energy in the tank, as it were, I kept going. But the times where I changed was usually because I'd meet a fork in the road. And for me, it was usually like quite a definitive fork in the road. Either I was going to call it a day or I needed to do something radically different. And in the end, in my late 30s, that was to go and see professional medical help, which for me was an admission of defeat. I didn't apply that to any other part of my body, but for my brain, for some bizarre reason, I thought I had to be able to think myself better. And I wouldn't even dream of, if I had diabetes, of trying to do the same there or any other illness.
And to that point you made in your late 30s, pushing yourself to go seek professional help. In my eyes and ears, as another human being, is that at some point we reach a breaking point. You mentioned the fork in the road, and I think that's a good illustration because at some point, if we're fortunate enough, we can be right there before the breaking point actually happens, and we have a decision to make. Do we risk and continue what we've been doing that's been like a Band-Aid for the situation, or do we make the tougher decision and do what we necessarily may not want to do, but we totally know in our heart it's the most necessary thing to do? What did that look like for you when you made that moment choice that you're going to actually commit to professional help?
I was on my last legs. I tried everything I could think of. I knew that there was nothing, that I could think of that I hadn't tried to try and get better. I didn't at that point know. So I'd also tried, I don't know if you know what I mean by 12-step fellowships. So probably one of the best known are like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. So I'd tried a number of different 12-step fellowships, excuse me, and worked through their programs. So I tried all of that. And yeah, it was just, I'd just run out of options. And how did I feel? I felt desperate. I felt humiliated. I was embarrassed. Yeah. And if there'd been any other option, doesn't matter how how slim, I would have gone for it. But I couldn't think of anything. And at that point, I don't think I really knew how professional medical help could help, except that it was the one thing that I'd avoided doing.
And that makes sense. When you started the process of receiving professional help and when you received the official diagnosis, how did you react to that? Was it like you had a gut feeling that it could be this, or were you in shock? What was that like for you when you received the diagnosis?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I saw two therapists in quite quick succession, and they both said that I was suffering from severe depression. And my reaction was, no, I'm not. And despite everything, I mean, what was going on inside my brain was just like a maelstrom of madness. And it had been like that for, forever I can remember. But I don't know whether it was an admission of depression was, again, another admission of weakness. But the time that I was able to accept it was about 2 years later when, so I'd refused to go on medication. And I was then referred to a psychiatrist, and they asked me to track my moods for a year. And I did it on a daily basis. And it was then that I realized, actually, there's no way in a month of Sundays I'm going to be able to sort this out myself, because, if that's a midpoint, most of the time I'd have occasional spikes up, and most of the time I'd be sort of rattling along the bottom. And after another year of resisting medication, I finally agreed. It was actually a friend of mine who persuaded me. And after about, I'd say 2 to 3 months of taking an antidepressant, I suddenly realized, oh my God, I have been depressed. And the reason I couldn't say so before, because that was the norm for me. I knew nothing different. So when somebody said you're depressed, no, I'm not, because it's all I'd known. But when I experienced what a healthy brain might feel like, it was like, oh, right, okay, I get it now.
Once again, that's on Refocus Radio, and watching us online, talking to our guest, Jonathan Kemp. When you said untreated bipolar disorder and dyslexia, it takes a toll on you. It also takes a toll on your identity. When you think about what started to happen for you with medication, did that cause any battle or conflict with your identity, how you saw yourself, or did you still kind of see yourself as this professional who still works and do all this, or were there any times you had any struggle trying to stay consistent with what you knew who you were?
So again, a good question. So initially I was diagnosed with depression. I took medication for depression. And about a year afterwards, I actually went to a treatment center in the US who had a good reputation. And the reason I went there was because I just hit another low point, and I was just at my wit's end. And when I went there, I was diagnosed with bipolar. So it's quite common with people with bipolar disorder that it's not actually diagnosed for quite a few years after first seeing a medical or mental health professional. And the tricky thing is that people will go and see the doctor not when they're feeling great, which is the hypomania or the mania in a bipolar disorder, but when they've hit the bottom and had a crash. And they'll often be diagnosed with depression, put on an antidepressant, and that can then actually trigger the hypomania or the mania. For me, it was that helped to level out my moods. I didn't really, to be honest, it was only 20 years later. So during COVID, I really started to understand bipolar disorder at a much deeper level. But then I wasn't really sort of consciously aware of these highs. I still had them. I still had the crashes. And when I have a crash or when I'm in a depressive phase, it is a real struggle. But as you alluded to, I was determined, whatever I was doing, if I was going out doing corporate training or I was doing executive coaching, they would have no idea what was happening. And actually, I bumped into a client yesterday and we had a coffee and he read my book as an advanced reader. And he said he found it difficult to match what he read in the book, because I've been very open and frank, with what he knew me as a person, because I gave no indication to it whatsoever. The interesting thing is, if I met someone I knew well when I was in a depressive state, I couldn't hide it, but I needed to know the person really well for that to happen.
And with that said, to follow up on that, did you find yourself with or without medication use, did you ever find yourself tired trying to be that polished version of yourself when you're out there in the professional world versus when the lights are off?
Yes and no. And the reason I say yes and no is because it was an effort to sort of pull the cat out of the bag. And I remember a few occasions, I don't even know how I did it. But the tiring bit, so let's say you were my client and I'd come and see you, I would be super focused, trying to listen to what you're, the sort of things that you were interested in, seeing if I could add value. And that level of focus helped me. Where I felt tired was when I would come away and then I was on my own again. And then the grey mist would come back in, and then just the struggle, the sort of internal struggle would come back in. So interestingly enough, the real tiredness came post an event.
That's very interesting. So follow up on that. When you were taking medication, when you were away from everyone, did that seem to help that tiredness, or did it stay the same, or what was that like?
The medication made a transformational difference. So, I remember thinking quite a few times that it was at times it was like a miracle. It was like I'd been given a life. And even if my life sort of terminated early, at least I knew what it felt like to have, a quality of life. And this is with the benefit of hindsight, but I sort of carried on business as usual. So, I'm always thinking of ideas. I'm always I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And I was taking substantial risks, investing in ideas. And what I wasn't doing, and I don't think I recognized the cruciality of doing it, what I wasn't doing was trying to curtail these bipolar highs. So there are various types of bipolar. I have bipolar disorder type 2, where I have hypomania. So I'll go right up to the borderline of sort of sanity and insanity. I will float along there for as long as I can sustain it. And at some point, my energy will run out. The stress will become so much that I will crash. And without really thinking about it, I kept doing this because I would get involved in these work projects. I then have this sort of laser-like focus. But all of that I was doing because when I do that, I feel alive and I'm able to function and focus. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it didn't really occur to me to try and curtail that. And it was only during COVID that I suddenly realized I'd got all the whole thing sort of trying to think of a polite expression, but arse about face.
Once again, listen, I'll be focused radio and talking to our guest today, Jonathan Kemp. When you speed things up, because I know we close on time, but when you speed things up, at what point did you decide to create this system called SmartWisdom? You help professionals and students with this. So what piqued that interest to make that happen?
Yeah, sure. It was actually more by accident. So I'd been in the Met Police, which is the London Police, for 12 years. I left to do some postgraduate study. I'd never been to university, so I skipped the undergraduate degree. But I knew if I did what I did at school, there was no chance of doing anything. And I started off with some other techniques for recording information in a different way. I didn't know if it would work, but I just really stuck with it and then started making tweaks and then, bringing in some other aspects and then created my own system, which I realized would help not only myself, but anybody. And actually, I didn't know I had dyslexia until I was 49. I had no idea. Well, certainly until my 40s, I had no idea. And what the SmartWisdom does, it helps me to focus, concentrate, and also to mentally process new information as I'm listening to it, which is the challenge I have with the dyslexia.
When you think about how results or transformations that you've been able to see, not just for yourself, but with your students and professionals that you share this SmartWisdom with, how have you seen it help navigate their not just mind, but action? Because it's one thing to feel better, but it's a whole transformational feeling when you actually are applying this type of knowledge into action.
Yeah, so SmartWisdom, it replaces traditional handwritten note-taking. So you'll use it in like meetings, interviews, when you're doing any form of planning. And what it does, it gives the person greater clarity and greater control either over everything they're listening to or everything they're thinking. So if they're in a meeting, they're able to understand what's being said at a deeper level than other people and as a result, able to really question it and able to potentially spot ideas that other people don't.
If someone's watching us and listening to us on podcast or radio and they feel like they might feel more ashamed to go get professional help, or they feel like it's risky on one end or the other, what will you say to them right now to kind of help them maybe dig a little bit deeper before they rush to saying no?
I would say to them, so the things I didn't get help for was my mental health, but I couldn't have described it as clearly as I have just now. And I would say is treat mental health the same as physical health. So if you sprained your ankle, you got a torn ligament, there's something wrong with, your stomach or anything else, you go and see a doctor. If you've got earache, if there's something wrong with your nose, your throat, your eyes, you go and see a doctor. The brain is no different. If you're not feeling, if you're not feeling comfortable, or if it just feels that everything is an effort or controlling your thinking is an effort, then I would thoroughly recommend not doing what I did, which was try and solve it myself, but actually going and getting professional medical help. And if finances are difficult, trying to link up with some of the charities, either internationally or nationally within the USA or locally within Texas, and contact some of the mental health charities and ask for help, or if you can, see a doctor and ask for help. For me, that was what has been transformational.
Once again, listen, I'll be focused ready and watching this online to our guest today, Jonathan Kemp. If someone wants to stay in contact with you, obviously you're doing way better today because you're on different shows sharing your message and story, which I think is something to commend. How can people keep in touch with not just your resources, but your books?
Yeah, so I've written a book which is going to be coming out on the 10th of October called Finding Peace of Mind, which is a story of my journey, but also the second part is my analysis of what works and doesn't work. And the foundation stone of that is getting professional medical help. So it will be available on Amazon and in stores, but also you'll be able to stay in contact. I'm having a new website built, jonathankemp.com, and you'll be able to stay in contact that way.
Go ahead.
So the other thing that might be of interest is I'm going to do a 7-month mental health walk and talk through the length of the United Kingdom and then Ireland.
That's a big
walking, yeah, and with the idea of just spreading the message that it's okay to talk about mental health and it's okay to ask for help.
And quick follow-up on that, is that something that they can keep track on your website and online? Are you going to have like a one event type thing, or is it going to be like a series kind of documented? How's that going to look?
So I'm going to physically walk the whole distance. It'll be about 3,000 miles. And what I'm going to do is do talks. So I'll stop in the cities and see if I can arrange talks, either at businesses or in charities. I also plan to interview people randomly about sort of mental health and mental well-being. And all of it, I'm going to sort of probably on the website as a central point, keep a record of sort of where I'm at and what I'm up to.
Sounds like a fun project. So good wishes on that. Like I always want to say to our guest today, Jonathan, thank you for your time, man.
I really appreciate you asking me. Thank you.